Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the launch of the second edition of Fashion Thinking. So just wanted to sort of reflecting back as I prepared for tonight. I got a call or an email rather, from Georgia Kennedy, who's the managing editor at Bloomsbury, saying that they were interested in doing a second edition of the book. And I was really thrilled because that obviously is a testimony to the success of the first edition. But obviously because fashion itself changes at such a rapid pace, and as educators, we're constantly update our own methods and theory and practice that inform our pedagogy. It was challenging at first and interesting to revisit something I had written about 7 years previously. But I was really pleased upon a really close review to discover that the content still held up. And the first edition was initially slated to be entitled Fashion Process. So it's a little sort of behind the scenes story, until the last moment. Bloomsbury countered with Fashion Thinking. And in hindsight, I think that this was a really critical shift because historically speaking, there's been such a divide between theory and practice, between thinking and making. And fashion is still fighting for legitimacy within the academy and is often stereotyped as being superficial, not intellectual, nor critical. And hopefully this new edition will begin to bridge the gap. So just a little bit about the whole impetus for the book in the initial stages when I was writing the first edition. My ethos as a teacher really informed the concept for fashion thinking. I wanted to ensure that students had a visual reference that showed them multiple ways into the fashion design process, that there's no right or wrong method, that to break a stereotype we so often associate with fashion designers. Not everyone starts with a sketch. In fact, some designers like Donna Karan don't sketch at all and prefer to drape on the form. For others, like Sandra Rhodes, textile itself is an entry point. Challenging status quo is something that we as educators always talk about with our students. And I created this little formula for myself that reminds me of how to think about fashion. So it's fashion plus X, Y, or Z equals question mark. So what else are we adding to fashion that's going to become a lens by which we see it and by which we redefine it? We have to really change the way we think in order to deliver real change within the industry. It's such an important moment for a term like fashion thinking. And it's a question that later on I'm going to introduce to the panel, is a fundamental question. What does it mean to be a fashion designer? And what does it mean to be a fashion designer today? I think for most of us, we would say that talent is not enough. Students need to think critically and interrogate the issues facing society: racism, thin privilege, fat phobia, Eurocentric beauty standards, the list goes on. Responsibility is on us as educators to invest in training the next generation, to think holistically about the discipline and consider the intersection of fashion at X, Y, and Z. Establishing systems is crucial for any designer, whether as a student or further down the line in your career. The example shown here shows the zero waste design process by Holly McQuillan, developed in her PhD, which I'm pleased to say she just posted today, has been published. So congratulations to Holly if you're watching. The design cycle is ultimately a journey, and each journey is unique. I emphasize the importance of iteration, doing many versions in order to gather critical information to inform the next step in the process. Embracing mistake making is critical, as often that is the place where we learn the most. Throughout my years as an educator, I observed two umbrella methods of working, which I entitled linear and random. We may all engage in these at one point or another in our process, and in many ways, these map to our personalities, but it's helpful for students to recognize how they work in order to make sense of their process. So reformatted into chapters, fashion thinking follows 10 designers through 3 phases of their process: idea, research, and design. Each chapter is followed by perspectives interview from a variety of contributors: designers, journalists, and professors with expertise ranging across sustainability, zero waste design, textiles, fashion studies, anthropology, art, and architecture. My hope is that the updates to the second edition represent a generation of design graduates who are thinking differently about the future, who leverage technology in creative ways, who employ universal human-centered design strategies towards more inclusive outcomes, who develop sustainable systems and approach fashion as an interdisciplinary subject where issues such as health, wellness, and social justice are at the forefront of their thinking. And now I'm very pleased to introduce 4 contributors from our fashion thinking for our first panel. So starting with Sara. Sara Kozlowski is a Vice President of Education and Professional Development for the Council of Fashion Designers of America, with oversight of a portfolio of programs providing access to mentorship, awards, and resources for students, graduates, early emerging talent, and established designers. Initiatives include the Elaine Gold Launchpad, Sustainability Resource Hub, the CFDA and Lexus Fashion Initiative, Fashion Future Graduate Showcase, the Eileen Fisher Social Innovator Award, and Kenneth Cole Footwear and Innovation Award. Prior to the CFDA, Sara served in academic leadership roles for more than a decade, with extensive experience creating design and sustainable strategies courses for undergraduate, graduate, and executive education. As a full-time educator from 2006 to 2014, she taught capstone courses across MFA and BFA programs at various academic institutions, including her alma mater, Parsons, with a specialization in sustainable systems. Ji-won Choi was born in Seoul, raised in the Midwest, and educated in New York and Paris. Her work revolves around using design to connect cultures while promoting positive change. She graduated from Parsons School of Design with a BFA in Fashion Design in 2017, where she was the recipient of Karen's Empowering Imagination Award and the Yuxogen Award that led to her launching a capsule collection for Yux the following year. Ji was a finalist of Eyes on Talent and the CFDA Fashion Future Graduate Showcase. Post-graduation, she was selected for a series of opportunities to present her work as one of 4 international designers in the Ones to Watch category by Fashion Scout at London Fashion Week, in partnership with CFDA and LifeWater at New York Fashion Week in 2018, and subsequently at GT Bank's Fashion Weekend at Lagos, Nigeria. In 2019, Choi collaborated with Adidas Originals, showing at London Fashion Week. The first drop of 2 was launched a week later in the Adidas stores worldwide and online. She also collaborated with Parsons alum Olivia O'Blank on a design of Adidas Superstar shoes earlier this year, and some of you may have recognized her of being as recently as being a participant on Making the Cut. Camila Chiriboga is a menswear designer who was born in Ecuador and moved to New York to study at Parsons Fashion. Her passion lies in the intersection of fashion, health, and technology. In 2017, Camila won a Uniqlo apprenticeship and was part of the CFDA Fashion Future Graduate Showcase. Notably, she was the winner of the AARP Award for Fashion Disruptors, and as a result, AARP sponsored a video highlighting her thesis, which led to her winning the Eyes on Talent Innovation Award and becoming a finalist for the Webby Awards in the category of fashion and beauty. After graduation, Camila was one of 10 graduates selected by global brands to work in her LIO Innovation Lab on creative strategy and inclusive design for a 1-year incubator program. There, she received funding to start a sustainability and inclusive design platform. Subsequently, she was invited to join Unleashed 2018, an innovation lab set up globally to move forward the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And in 2019, Camila was named one of 4 finalists by Eyes on Talent for the 2019 Inclusive Design Award. She recently returned to the US and is now working as a 3D designer at Chloe Virtual Fashion. Last but not least is Tiffany Huang, who's a Taiwanese-born designer in the USA. As a BFA graduate from Parsons, she specialized in sustainable conscious textiles. As a designer, she is always finding new possibilities of using materials to create a dialogue between textiles and the human body. In 2016, Tiffany won the Vogue Caring Empowering Imagination Award. She was a finalist in the Eyes on Talent Innovation Award and semi-finalist for Designer of the Year. Her thesis collection was showcased at the Parsons Benefit and Saks Fifth Avenue. Post-graduation, her thesis collection was exhibited in New York Textile Month. She was also selected as an innovator in residence at the XRC Labs and sponsored by CFDA LifeWater to exhibit her new collection entitled Umbrella Ghosts, a collaboration with Kai Lu Guan at New York Fashion Week in September 2016. Tiffany is also a 3D designer at Chloe Virtual Fashion here in New York. So please join me in welcoming our panelists for this evening. And if we can go to the pages of the book chapters, that would be great. And we can just click. So I'm going to just click through the pages of the various chapters. We're seeing Sara's at the moment, and we're going to go through in order. I'm going to go into Ji-Wan's and so on. So those will just be quick snapshots to let you all see a sense of the new edition and the layout. So I think what we wanted to do was just have a conversation with all of you. They're highly credentialed, as you can hear from their bios, like phenomenal work and phenomenal representations of perspectives on the fashion industry. So I think rather than sort of mirror exactly the content that you talked about in the book and the conversations there, because as you can see, we're really focused in the practice sections of the book on process, unpacking the design process from each of you that shared, and also from, in Sara's case, speaking to a lot of the collaborations that she does with CFDA, and of which many of you have participated in. So I think starting off, given the circumstances that we're finding ourselves in, I think one of the biggest prevailing questions that's on all of our minds is fashion still relevant? And if so, why? And I'll just throw that out for anyone who wants to jump into that, answer that.
I'll start. And first, thank you so much, Fiona. And it's a pleasure to be joining this conversation with Tiffany, Camila, and everyone in Ji-Wan. I think that, this year has shown us the eye of truth and so many different intersections beyond the pandemic as we, recognize the critical urgency for more equity and it really has been a year of reckoning in so many ways. And I think fashion is always a vehicle and an amplifier, and it's also a reflection of what's happening in society, what's happening in culture. So absolutely, fashion matters now more than ever, and just hopefully to catalyze this opportunity for true change. We talk about change a lot, and this is our, I think, big opportunity to really be meaningful and purposeful in how we move forward to have positive impact in really every area that we live in.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for having us. And I was just like taking photos of all the pages. This is the first time I've seen it. It looks amazing. Congratulations. Super cool. I mean, definitely, yes, fashion is so more relevant than ever today, I feel like. And fashion is a part of everybody's lives, whether they realize it or not. And I talk to my friends these days, and, something that everyone's been saying to me is how much they're sick of wearing, just your pajamas, sweatpants while they're just staying at home in lockdown. And that just shows how much fashion plays into your mood and how it is a reflection of your lifestyle, how the world is moving around you. And I think fashion is a direct correlation of what's happening, what you are doing yourself. And I think it's just so embedded in everyone's lives, no matter what is happening, basically.
And if I can jump in, also thank you for inviting me, Fiona. I'm so excited to be here. And I think something really important is, like, fashion will become so relevant, even more relevant once we are out of any lockdown. Like, I feel like people will just explode and want to express themselves, want to be seen, because fashion is so much dictated by our surroundings. Being at home, I realize that when I want to feel good, I really put something, like even a dress on, just like it really changes the way you feel, even if people see you or not. So I think like a big revolution will happen once things start to normalize, because people will see everyone again and you'll want to look your best, and even maybe change the way you looked and the way who you were.
Yeah, exactly.
I can go next. Again, thank you, Fiona, for organizing this, and congrats on this new book. It looks incredible. I was so excited when I got it in the mail. Yeah, just kind of echoing what everyone is saying. Of course, like, fashion will always be relevant as long as humans need to wear clothes. And I think one common theme that we have been hearing a lot over this year is just about changing and how we can just change the industry for good. And I think just by looking at what a lot of fashion companies are doing, you know, are they really committed to creating systematic change to their entire design process and production and all the way to the way they are selling these products to their customers? Or are they just by doing it just by making some masks and, you know, sourcing a couple of sustainable fabrics? Because I think we're at a breaking point now. If we still just only do the kind of bare minimum, it's not going to help anyone. And especially, I think, just from my very couple of years of experience working in the industry after graduation, from brands that are more kind of mass production to brands that are more sustainable, honestly, the design process is very similar in all these brands. Like how many design houses you go, it's like a board of images printed off Instagram. So all the collections are all morphing into one, and everybody is still doing all these hand sketches and an insane amount of sampling. So I think this year could really be a really good just learning experience for everyone, and hopefully that we really take this time to kind of reflect and create change that really matters.
I think that's a really great segue into another question, because I think in school, as educators, we're always pushing you to reimagine the system, to challenge stereotypes, to find solutions to the problems. And I think I feel conflicted as an educator asking all of you to do that as sort of emerging generation of designers, because it's a massive mantle to put on your shoulders, if you will. So even reflecting back to your time as a student, did you feel that pressure? And I know Sara has also been an educator and also is working. You have dual perspective because you've been an educator, but you also now are in the CFDA with that similar sort of weight on your shoulders in a different context of this. It's been going around for a long time, this whole sense of the industry's broken, we have to fix it, and yet it's still broken. And then what you're talking about, Tiffany, is highlighting even more problems. So I'll open that up to whoever with any thoughts.
Can I go on that one?
Yeah, jump in. You don't, no permission, just jump in.
Like at school, we had the pressure of like doing something completely different, and like it was amazing. And then going out into the industry, having to interview for jobs. I remember like getting to the last stages of various jobs, and they'll be like, "Are you really gonna feel fulfilled designing a teenage girl t-shirts after everything you've explained?" And I was like, I really don't know. Like, to be honest, I don't even know if I want this job. And so then just like so much pressure of like, then you should do your own thing. You should do your own thing. You should do your own thing. And I think it's been a balance of like going your own path, but also showing other people how they can do it and how to incorporate, for example, my work about inclusive design. Like, how can other companies incorporate that inclusive design mentality in staffing, also in their final outcomes and what they produce. But I remember like one of the last interviews I had, I just become super passionate about inclusive design and like all my vision for it. And then the person that was interviewing me, they were like, "What job would you get then? Like, what would be your next step?" And I was like, "I don't know. I think I'd have to create that." But that's kind of like, I feel like that tension of like coming up with really new things and seeing how you can balance that with how the world and the state of fashion is now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Camila.
I mean, it really was a lot of pressure because I think Parsons is very good at making the students really think about the fashion system as a whole and trying to problem solve basically. And for me, like, I went to Parsons for design. So even before I'm a fashion designer, I'm a designer first and foremost, and designers were meant to solve problems. And I think fashion does have a lot of problems to solve. So, I mean, I really did appreciate all of that pressure because, I mean, yes, it's true. I think a lot of people do view fashion as something that's very superficial and something that isn't so concept driven, and they don't realize that it has so many different facets within the industry. And it really did force me to look at the fashion industry as a whole and the creative process as a whole, and really try to think about how to solve these different problems, how to reimagine different processes. So I really, really loved my whole education at Parsons in that regard.
Any other thoughts? Or I think it tied in something you said earlier about Camila, about are you going to be satisfied designing a t-shirt for a teenage girl? We teach you obviously to go sort of full on, like you said, there's no restrictions, and that is the beauty of school. You don't have those commercial restrictions on you. You can imagine any possibility. That's the whole point, because you can take that as far as you need to take it, and then you can always distill that back when you go out into industry. But I think it touches on something else that we often see with students, and I'm sure this resonates with you as well, Sara, that this tension between creativity and commercial viability as an either or scenario, or the sort of opposites of what students always are talking about. Well, it's not wearable. This concept of what you think of as wearable versus conceptual. So maybe thinking back to how you thought about that. I know, G, you talk about that in the book chapter and the challenges of that, and as you move through, even in the thesis collection. So even as you struggle with that as a student, and now as you've been out as a designer in the world, how has that shifted for you, that sort of tension between that?
Honestly, the tension has gotten more and more intense as I work in the industry, because yes, it's true, I have my own brand, but at this point, it's not just me. I have investors to please. In the end, yes, fashion is about trying to solve these social issues and addressing these problems in the industry. But first and foremost, I think it's easy to forget that fashion is a business. When you're in school, you don't realize it's a business because all you want to do is be very creative and try to problem solve. But all my investors care about is how much revenue we're bringing in. So in the end, do they really care if this garment says something very impactful? Their first thought is, are most people going to want to buy and wear this? So I think that sort of tension is a bit stronger than ever for me, at least. And it's always a balance, and it's a balance I'm still trying to work out. And I think I'm gonna spend many more years trying to figure out the right balance for that. But yeah, it's rough. It's rough. It's rough because I really miss school, and I could just be as creative as I want, and didn't really, because when you're working on your portfolio, all you want to do is express your concept, express what social issue you want to address, and it does work in real life, but I think you have a lot more different factors in play. My brand is about sustainability, but also sustainable fabrics. At least in Italy, it's 3 times as more as just polyester and regular fabrics. And are your investors gonna see that as a viable business method? So it's just a lot of different things. Yeah.
Sara, were you going to say something, or am I?
Yeah, it's true. As Jiwon just articulated the dilemma of every founder and creative entrepreneur, and you talk about profitability and financial value, and every business really at its core is about value. But I do feel optimistic through all of this difficult time, again, about the opportunity for a value system reset, and hopefully being able to find the balance. So obviously, with financial value, but also human capital, social capital. And I do think that comes through systems and innovation, and seeing the opportunity for what social innovation really looks like alongside technological innovation. And I think what you've captured here through showing such creativity and the designers here exemplifies where the industry versus system is hopefully really going. You all on the panel have really paved the way for what systems thinking and design thinking looks like in action. And I think that, there is good business in terms of profitability. So I feel quite optimistic, actually. If you had asked me the question 10 years ago, I might have had a different answer. But, economically, it cannot be underestimated, the devastation, not only to the fashion sector, but everywhere. And then we're, as well confronted with the climate crisis and all these other change imperatives. So we must use this, and we do need creativity and ingenuity to drive that innovation and to drive the change.
Yeah, I'm really optimistic about it too, actually. Like I'm probably going more further into this than I normally would have because I had a long day with my investors today. So
it's very good. And it needs to be said. I mean,
I'm like frustration mode today, but
I like to think I'm on my fourth life, and my first was as a designer, and I spent a season sleeping on my cutting table so that I could ship my orders to Barney's. And after 6 years, this is not for me. So, but I say that because I hear you, and I appreciate your honesty. And I think for the audience, it's so important to acknowledge that as a creative, there is the commerce and the revenue and the financial, responsibility just as much as the environmental and the social and cultural responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, but I still do remain optimistic. Like, I mean, we are still a sustainable brand. So obviously they do see the value in that, and they do see the importance in sustainability and the need to focus or make sustainability a priority. But I think it's about, building a team with people that you really trust, that really believes in all of your values and all the innovations that you can offer and are willing to work with you, and finding suppliers who are also very passionate about finding new resources and new techniques and new materials that are more innovative. And no, I'm very positive about it. I just went on a anyway, thank you.
I think it's also a good moment to talk about collaboration because all of you have experienced collaboration and support from various different external partnerships, from Camila, AARP, and your experience with global brands. And this one is what we have on the screen is Tiffany's project, which was actually Sara's heavily involved in this and can speak to that in terms of the sponsorship that you received, and also G received as well as part of the CFDA Life Water series. And maybe Sara and or Tiffany and G can speak to like that experience and like the support of emerging talent, and how important entities like the CFDA are in helping launch and support and give that the valuable business support as well, and sort of the well-rounded kind of package in terms of those students that are graduating and giving them that platform.
Sure. I mean, I think at the CFDA, we, our mission and purpose is really aligned to supporting the life cycle of talent. And that begins with scholarship and support to students. And then, Jiwan, Tiffany, and Camila, I think are very fortunate to have seen your graduate portfolios and to see you now as professionals and entrepreneurs. And that's really what we aspire to, and hopefully we can do more and have meaningful impact at future stages of your business and your professional journeys. But Tiffany, I mean, I know I can say candidly, I mean, everybody who engages with your work is just like, oh my gosh, the technology and the innovation and the way you created such an imagination around everything you're doing with AI and coding is just like so desirable, so beautiful, but so important. It's really incredible work.
Thank you, Sara. I'm like blushing. Definitely think like collaboration with everything, even like, it doesn't matter whether you're like doing your own brand, you will have to have the right partners when you enter like a bigger organization, any kind of company, like whether it's a fashion brand or right now me and Camila are working at Chloe. If you work in a fashion brand as a designer, you'll realize a lot of the times if you don't have the merchant's support, then you can't really bring your ideas into life. So it's always that kind of constant like communication with the people on the business side, understanding what their needs are. And I think as designers, you're always just trying to find the best solution for everyone. And I always feel like in bigger companies, designers are almost like diplomats that are just trying to find out something that makes everyone happy and also create products that, you know, makes customers happy and enjoy buying them. And especially like now, me and Camila's job is working with so many different clients, companies of different scales and across industries, and collaboration is everything. And we just talk with so many different people every day. And it's that kind of constant communication, understanding what their goals are, and just always trying our best to help them and achieve what they want to do in the software. So yeah, I think it's definitely the kind of key to everything.
And I think jumping off of what Tiffany said, like the collaboration part, of course, is like a big part of our job right now. But I also think that, at least in my work, because I was kind of like a translator to the ideas and lifestyles and ways of moving through life for the people I worked with my users, with my amazing friends. But so what, like, it was from the collaboration that we got like the best results. It was like listening to what they needed and just being that like design eye filter to communicate those ideas. So I think it's the same in the real world. Like, for example, when I was in Japan working for Uniqlo, it might look like a very simple t-shirt, but the amount of tests we did with it, the amount of people, like all the voices we'd hear from our customers, it's really a back and forth. And that's why, for example, there's a simple sleeve roll up for one of the jackets that has elastic, but it was really going into people's homes, seeing how they use this jacket, seeing that when they'd wash the dishes, they'd get wet. So just that little pushing it up. So it's very tiny details, but you can only see when you're collaborating with someone. You wouldn't just be able to see from your sketchpad or your computer. So yeah.
That's a really good point, actually, because my first big collab was with Adidas Originals. And before I did the collab with Adidas, it was my thesis collection. And then I did New York Fashion Week, but they were very much like installation based, artistic collections, which you wouldn't be able to like see a person walking down the street in this. It was more about the concept and more about a statement. But after my collab with Adidas, I was really able to hone in my brand identity a bit more and think more about wearability, think more about practicality, and take my brand identity into something that could be applied in real life. And that collab really did help me to see how I could translate my work into something that was more realistic. I mean, still in a creative way, but in a way that still, worked practically. And it also allowed me to reach different parts of the market that I, wasn't able to reach before. So I think collabs just make both of the participants work even stronger because you're bringing two different audience bases together and two different brand identities together. So it only makes work stronger.
I think also that leads into a discussion around how you did develop your design codes and methodologies. I think that that's something that we're always keen to be pushing our students to discover as soon as possible, understanding like what it is makes you tick. Like we talked about in the beginning, the entry points into fashion are very different for each one of you. And it is a process of trial and error, trying to discover what those are. And like to G's point, you're still evolving that and refining it. So it'd be great to hear some of you speak about the challenges, because I think that was also something that I asked for all the contributors was, tell us about the things that were struggles, and getting that into the book was really important to me because it's not all like this perfect kind of slick thing, which was kind of also the impetus for the book in the initial stages, because pre-2010, when I went to Bloomsbury with the proposal, all the textbooks in fashion were very formulaic, and it was kind of, here's your mood board, here's your fabrics, here's your lineup of sketches, and bam, you have a presentation and that's it. And there was absolutely no differentiation between process, someone entering from textile point of view, somebody entering from a draped methodology or whatever. It was all very much samey, and there was no unmasking of the process. Like, how did you do this? What were the struggles in the midst of it? So that was really what I was keen to do in this book, was to kind of unpack that. So maybe you'd want to share some of your journeys in terms of how you evolved through school and beyond, in terms of your thinking, your design philosophy, and what's informed it. And that goes for you too, Sara, because we're both in another trajectory. So, anyone can jump in.
I'll say, I think, Fiona, you said it so well when you were sharing in the beginning of the panel, that how well you're highlighting case studies and important to the design process is the intervention or the mistake making, and iterating and finding, your way and working through that challenge to find the opportunity. I think that's what, a lot of design is aimed to get to. And I think, that this book and all the creativity and talent within it, it just really exemplifies how important that is.
Well, I can talk about one thing that has remained consistent throughout my thesis collection and to my collections now is the idea of connecting cultures. And when I did my thesis, I didn't really realize it immediately, but how that came about was my travels and experiencing different cultures. And it was really about identifying what was most important for me to address. And I think the core of my brand is about addressing the idea that all of these cultures are interconnected and they can live together within one world. And that is what I try to do within my brand now. And it's something that I didn't even realize when I was doing my thesis, but as I did every collection and as I was redefining every process that I've been doing, it's just become clearer and clearer. And I mean, yeah, I think just the most important thing is just identifying the most important thing about you that you want to address and you want to find a solution for, basically.
I think for my process, like everything came from mistakes because like, for example, because I was designing for a living experience that I did not have. So my garments were made for blind and visually impaired. And I had never, maybe I had seen someone blind and visually impaired, but I had never interacted with them. So everything came from mistakes. Like first day taking sketches to show them, absolutely mistake. And then like asking them, oh, do you like this? No, you have to have them touch it. Or like how I describe clothing to them. So like shapes, like I would have to tell them more textures and like touch, feel this shape, like touch around your body. Photo shoots also, you cannot tell them how to pose. So it was all about like, okay, how do we build this story for them to imagine something in their head? So, okay, you're singing opera, sing as loud as you can and like direct the music and stuff. And so we'd get their poses. So it was all about like not knowing a person's perspective to be able to design. So I think that like it just led me to design in different ways. For example, I also said like, oh, let's use Braille, but then meeting with professors of children that are learning Braille, they were like, no, really, most of people who are blind and visually impaired don't know Braille. So you have to use different methods. So it actually, like all those roadblocks, like all the mistakes were what led to new solutions and trying new things. And also having people super open to testing things with me.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Tiffany? I know you had a lot of technology going on with this particular project that's in the book with augmented reality.
Yeah, I think I feel like I just usually just trust like what I'm curious about and let that guide me. And I think people are just naturally drawn to different things. Like some people might be more interested in like natural dye. And for me, it's just always like the kind of idea of like adventures and exploration. And that really led me to kind of go on this journey of like thinking, oh, how can technology interact with fashion? And that's how I came to know Kailu, and knowing that she was working on something in a similar aspect. So reached out to her and we collaborated with each other. And yeah, I mean, throughout the process, there was a lot of like different hurdles that we have to overcome. For instance, like using the AR to scan the prints on the garments. At first I thought like, oh, maybe we will be able to do it with something more dimensional like knits or some kind of like woven fabrics, but it turns out all those shadows will affect the way that the AR camera scans your image. So then we realized the best way for it to work is using just flat prints, but then how do you still make that look tactile and exciting on a garment and not just like a boring digital print? I think that was the biggest challenge for me. And yeah, I think just follow your curiosity and just try everything once and see what sticks. And yeah, you will find something for you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. There was something that we started recently doing with our students, actually, which was talking about identity is a big word. It's a very loaded term, so I'm a little reluctant in using it, but it's sufficient. But I think it's sort of tied together with a question I brought up earlier, which what does the term fashion designer mean? We'll start there, and I'll go to the other question later. But in terms of like when you think about, I think it would be great to have us all think about when you thought about this as a young person growing up and you had aspirations to become a fashion designer. Like what did you think that was? And then when you were actually in school, what did you think it was? And then what do you think it is now? And has it changed? And how has that shifted? What impacted the shifts? And how do you think about it in this moment? It's like a 3-pronged question. What changed about your perceptions of it? They all got these questions ahead, so there's no excuse. I'm kidding.
I can go first. Yeah. I mean, definitely when I was younger, I was just like more naive to the idea of the whole thing. I would just know that, again, just my curiosity. I was very drawn to clothing and just interested to understand how clothing is created. So that's why I started my journey in learning design fashion. And I think in school, you are pushed very strongly by the professors and also your peers to just develop your own voice and your own point of view, and that everybody has a really strong voice. But then I think the hardest kind of I would say maybe like a culture shock after you graduate from school and entering the industry is that you realize, oh, actually people who have a kind of style that matches with a certain company, those are the people that have an easier time finding a job. So then you kind of question yourself like, oh my God, is my like identity actually like hurting my chances of finding some kind of financial security? And I think that again ties back into like the business and creative side, and it's always that constant struggle. And even just after graduating, I have so many friends, and including myself, like to find a job in New York, you have to almost like redo your portfolio. And a lot of times like the projects that the employers care about is not really all these like super creatives. They want to see if you can do flats, if you can hand sketch, can you make a repeat print? These are kind of the more just practical things that actually relate to their day-to-day basis. And I think it's just like always still finding a balance between like, okay, how do you still remain like your own voice within this bigger system and trying to affect change, just as like just starting out in these kind of huge corporations. Yeah, and I think just the important thing is just to like kind of always, I don't know, at least the way I stay sane is just still trying to like do your own thing on the side and just every day like take a few moments for yourself so you keep creating so that you have this kind of like sanctuary for yourself, that you're not kind of being affected by anyone else or the business people to affect like the way you create. And I think that for me has been like the really crucial part of like working in the industry, to remain that kind of like curiosity and not feeling like really affected. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. When I was younger, I used to think fashion designer was this glamorous being, you know, who were just making beautiful things. And I think starting school at Parsons, it made me realize that a fashion designer, to its core, it's about connecting with the wearer. It's about making the wearer feel something. It's about sending a message, like a statement. I think the biggest thing is making the wearer feel something. And as I work with my own brand, I think it has still stayed pretty consistent, because whatever collection I make, the main goal is to make the wearer feel whatever emotion you're trying to convey, whatever your statement you're trying to pass on. And yeah, I think a fashion designer, you're just interacting with the wearer and you're trying to send a message with the clothes. So it's a very direct interaction, I think.
Can I go? Okay.
Sure, yeah.
For me, also fashion design, I just love sewing since I was a kid. So I was like, yes, I'll get to sew all day, and sewing is going to be my homework. So that's what got me into fashion. But then also, I think you just realize that fashion is not just the sewing the garments, but it's the whole industry and the whole system. And I think for me, fashion design now is also thinking of course, identity and how a garment represents you, but also how you are affecting a community or a culture by what you create. And for example, also physically, how you are adapting to people's needs. That's something that I've been able to, I think, push a little bit more into brands that, for example, did not think so much about inclusion, but I'll be like, oh, this is a actually better way to move for everyone. In terms of physical design for a good functionality for your body and for what you do on a daily basis. So I think I've approached fashion a little bit more from like an industrial side of like actually functioning with the way your body moves, as well as creating your identity.
Sara, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really provocative question, because it, you know, over time, fashion's various actors and agents, including the designer, which is very often at the center, has really expanded so much. So, you know, what was asked or tasked for a designer to problem solve, you know, even 2 generations ago is vastly different than the level of, you know, consciousness and responsibility that this generation and the next generation have. And I think that that's actually can only be good. The fashion ecosystem is so much more complex, and it's really takes a lot of sophisticated thinking to navigate all the choice making. But it certainly has scaled up so vastly and just become so much, you know, enormously you know, embedded in a lot of different systems thinking. So I think what's required of a fashion designer today, you know, to go beyond designing the aesthetics of a product and thinking about, you know, its whole value chain and then its whole, you know, life cycle and circularity. And it's just, you know, going back to the optimism, I mean, just, you know, this work and having the voices of Huang and Tiffany and Camila and thinking about how wonderful it is that this next generation who's shown us their level of activism in so many ways throughout this year, and thinking about that power of influence and design and what they can do to change is really, in my work at least, very lifting.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I just wanted to check in to see if there was any questions moving to the attendees. I haven't seen any questions that have been added, so you can add them to the chat if that's easier, if people are more familiar with the chat, and you can let us know if you've got a question for a particular panelist or a general question for the panel. That would be fantastic. Or if you have any questions that you all want to throw out to one another, jump right in. It'd be great to hear while we're waiting for attendees to jump in with questions. It'd be great to hear more about, you know, where you all are in this moment in time in your careers. Is it where you thought you would be when you look back at student self, or even pre that for some of you that are not too far away from being a student? When you thought about your aspirations for your career, how's that compared in reality?
Oh, you can go.
Okay. I mean, honestly, like, I didn't even know like 3D existed like when I was in school. Like, I just thought it was more for gaming, but then like I've discovered like Chloe, and like I realized like, oh wow, maybe like, oh, like our expertise in fashion can be applied to something as well. So it's definitely not what I imagined, because I just didn't even know that this thing was here. But it's kind of a unexpected like kind of career path, but I'm enjoying it so far. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I thought that after I graduated, I would be working within a brand as an associate designer. So I think I've gone much further than I've ever imagined. So thank God. But also, I didn't think that I would end up in Milan building my brand from here, because we produce in Italy. And the reason is that in Italy, there is a lot of new suppliers who work with sustainable fabrics, and there are so many different manufacturers coming up in Italy who are creating really innovative fabrics. There's this one fabric that we're working with. They take the proteins out of crawfish, out of discarded, it's like food waste crawfish, and they take the proteins out of the shells and create that into a new fabric, and it's a sort of silk replacement. And there's so many different types of suppliers who do that kind of work here, and it was really important for me to be here and be close to the manufacturers and be able to connect and build relationships and learn more about these different materials that are being created in the industry today. So, you know, I never thought I would be in Italy doing this, like, you know, so yeah, it's been good overall, I would say.
Sarah, okay. So I also never imagined to be where I was. When I started fashion, I definitely never thought I would live 2 years in Japan and work for Uniqlo and have to learn Japanese from scratch for the job. But so I think that was really interesting, and just like a completely different mentality from what I had in Ecuador. So I think it was like a good new collision of values and cultures. But also, for example, with 3D design that I'm doing now, just with my vision for like personalizing fashion to different people's ways of moving, different abilities, it's just been a whole new level of how you can customize and personalize with much more speed, wasting less resources, and in a more creative way. So that's, I never thought I would end up in this either, but it's been amazing.
Sarah, you've had many different.
Let's just focus on their journeys and the journeys.
No, come on.
No, but I mean, I think that this, going back to, you know, that's why fashion thinking and systems thinking, design thinking are so important, because, you know, outside of our professional, you know, aspirations and journeys, we really don't know where life is going to take us. So it's almost like that toolbox of survival skills to navigate. I always think about, what is your GPS, you know, particularly in sustainability, in order to prioritize. I mean, how can you, you know, possibly try to achieve something if you're not able to really, stand in where you are now and where you hope to be and map the course to getting there. So I think that's what, is really exciting, is that the fact that, we do have these various time zones with us and these intersections across cultures, and, that Camila and Tiffany are working with Chloe, which, every time I see work at the CFDA, whether it's at the member level or student, I'm just blown away by the versatility of that technology and how creative it is, and it's so exciting to see. So, and I think that even in my generation, or when Fiona and I are former classmates, I think I can share that. And there was the critical thinking era, and it was still at its core about being able to navigate, choice and think analytically and have problem solving. But I think what's really exciting here that applies to professional journeys is just that the system itself is changing. The ecosystem, everything that we knew before, is really in that state of deconstruction and reconstruction. And what you're seeing through this dismantling is this regenerative, I think, true transformation. And the building blocks are, being assembled by the voices like Tiffany, Camila, and Jiwan. So it's very exciting because we don't know what it's going to look like yet, but hopefully it's going to be something great.
Agreed, absolutely. I joined the first time actually this year, the Forces of Fashion event a few weeks ago, and was amazing to hear Virgil Abloh and Bella Hadid, Naomi Campbell, you name it, right? All talking about how this particular global epidemic has completely shifted their focus. Completely. And I know Bella was saying, she felt like, even her, right, you're thinking, why, she's not going to have this insecurity, but I need to do every job and be every place. And she was saying, if somebody was like, I need you to be in Morocco tomorrow, she would be like, yes, I'll do it. And she had logged 297 flights wow. in a year. And he was, her. But I'm just wondering, they were all talking really about the importance of community, the importance of this sort of simplifying right. our lives. And it was so refreshing, caring for one another, empathy. And we talk about critical empathy a lot more and more in as educators. And it was very, very hopeful that everyone was speaking about this. But of course, then the pessimist in me, the cynic rather, is like, well, the minute we get back to our access to travel and the world outside of this virtual screen, will it snap back, or will we remember? Like, do we think that we're going to remember what really mattered from this time, and it will really change us? What do you think?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, particularly, you talked about community and culture importance, and through the pandemic, initially there was sort of the pause period, and I think, ecologically, it seemed like, oh, we have this moment of planetary healing, this opportunity, and they have calculated some, significant positive impact throughout this time. But at the same time, the climate crisis and of the fires and everything that we've seen throughout this year, show us, how critical it is. And behavior is at everything. So some days I think, oh, the new luxury will be in real life. Fashion Week has been digital this last season. It was a proof of concept that it actually can amplify creativity. But let's see, because I think that community piece, and just as we're, here today on Zoom as a community, it has been a level of fatigue, I think, the virtual living. So will we be able to maintain sort of a hybrid, structure and have all of the, I think, the benefits of partially virtually and still coming together and gathering meaningfully, or will we retrograde and go back, to what we do before? Hopefully it's another thing and it amalgamates into something positive. But the community piece is, I think, back to the beginning of the conversation tonight about, does fashion matter? It's all about the people and relationships and community, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect way to wrap up the panel. And the benefit of Zoom is that we can actually all be together in this conversation. And thank you so much for joining us from Camila in Ecuador, Jiwan in Milan. What time is it now? You're going to bed, I hope. It's like 1 a.m.
Almost 2.
Almost 2 a.m. in the morning. Oh my goodness, you get the prize for the the biggest commitment coming. But we're so thrilled that each one of you, and Tiffany as well in New York, and Sara in New York. So we're very, very thrilled that you could join us. And Jiwan, you will be getting a copy of the book. Glad you got to see your chapter live at the book launch, but you all should be getting copies, and hopefully you'll have the actual copy in your hands soon if you don't already. So thank you so much for your contributions to this valuable conversation and providing this amazing resource for students and for faculty. We listened to the feedback that the peer review had given us, and we spoke so much more about client-driven work, which was Camila's project, and working with your end user, and then also the collaborative piece, which both in a way, Jiwan and Tiffany, your work does as well. And so does Sara, of course, with all of your amazing collaborations that you do with CFDA. So been really wonderful chatting with you. I can release you now, and you're happy to actually come back if you would like. Not Jiwan, you're going to sleep and enjoy the.
Fiona, and thank you for including me in this conversation.
Of course, thank you so much.
And this book is so important to share.
Thank you so much, Sara. And actually, no, wait, before I go, it's just, I made a note to say that, and talking about, Sara was saying so eloquently about community. This is such a testimony to community and networks, right? Because Tiffany and Jiwan were my students. Camila sadly weren't my student, but I feel like very connected to you. And Sara and I were students together in person. So here we are. We'll not say how many years, but that's the power of family, right? So we really connected in persons and at school, and we stayed connected, and you're all in a book together, and all of these things happen because of relationships, and that at the end of the day is the most important thing. So loved all of the relations that we have, that you've grown from students to and peers and to friends, and kind of we stayed as part of a family. So wishing all of you very well the rest of this evening, and the rest of 2020, and then we'll start a new year, hopefully with a new beginning. But thank you for your time tonight and your answers to the questions, which are so thoughtful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.